the Guff Rune Totem. So let's have at it. Game number 1 is upon us. Joaquin versus Viper in round 3 of Swiss. And as we know, every win from this point on can really increase your chances dramatically to make that cutoff for day 2 and hopefully day 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joaquin is in contention for the Americas. I mean, turning up puts you in contention to get America's Grandmasters at the moment. But he does have the 7 points. The leaders are on 8 points. There's only 2 tournaments to go. So another 7 points for a 7-2 finish, or possibly a lot more if he goes all the way, would put him in a fantastic spot to become a Grandmaster.
Heck yeah. I mean, we have a lot of new rising talent in the Americas. Look no further than No Hands Gamer, who is currently sitting number 1 in Grandmasters Americas, despite it being, still a relative newcomer, only have joined in the past year or so. And his ascension has kind of been meteoric in the region, largely just due to the fact that a lot of people probably haven't discovered him. He's always been very good, and then when he started piecing together results, he got that opportunity. Can Joaquin do the same thing? From Latin America, we have a lot of players who are also on the come up as well. Although this opening hand is not it, having a completely unplayable hand, no ability to react. Lunar Eclipse has no targets because Viper does not plan on playing many minions early unless he's generating it. And so this is definitely a rough start for Joaquin. Not what he's looking for here early on.
Yeah, he could do with ripping that Fungal Fortunes, or this might not even become a game of Hearthstone. He may have no play on turn 3, and that would be, especially now, that would be just game over. This Font of Power, just allowing Viper to get some stuff on the board. It doesn't matter what stuff you put out there, just have stuff in case you need to trade into your opposing minions. You'll win if you don't lose. But he does rip the Fungal Fortune.
Wow. Huge pickup. Couldn't weave in the Lunar Eclipse as well if he wants to simply deal with his opponent's board. I don't think he wants to give the draw over to Viper, though. Makes sense. And it's okay, because I think in his mind, this early damage isn't what's going to be tilting things into Viper's favor, but you know what will? A second Incanter's Flow. Is that bait off the top? I think Viper's going to first look at other cards, see if there's any play that makes more sense before that.
Yeah, it's looking really good for him. Saving the Luna is a good play, though, that you can see that there's 2 6 health minions in Viper's hand. Raz being particularly destructive against the Token Druid, but unfortunately, obviously, it gets to do its work before the Eclipses will hit it. But Water Elemental is probably a play coming down next turn for Viper, so maybe that will get taken care of.
Astromancer Solarian makes an appearance here. We've seen Solarian Prime have decent impact, sometimes even the swing that Mage really looked for on broadcast, even as recently as a round ago. Viper gonna just play second in Canter's Flow. Joaquin not having it. Good news for Joaquin. His turn 5 is looking excellent.
It really
is. A little awkward, though.
Yeah, he needs to lead into that turn 5 by having something happen now. So I think we'll see him develop the board a little bit. He obviously hasn't got a great lot of options, but doesn't really need another Fungal. What he needs to do is at least propose something to the Mage that's going to be awkward. But he disagrees. He's just going to Fungal it up and try and go crazy next turn.
Yeah, I like this. Even though he's at a full hand, he's got a ton of power, and frankly, he doesn't need that much else. Maybe he would wish that he had the Solar Eclipse. I mean, that's probably exactly what he wishes that he had. But this is still a really powerful hand with a bunch of copies, 2 Lightning Blooms to give him up to 9 mana next turn. That's very, very powerful. The question becomes, is it a powerful enough board to handle what Viper wants to do? Because if Viper sets up this Astromancer Solarian ahead of time for the Raz, because he knows that Glowfly Swarm and Arbor Up are follow-up threats on the next turn, he would want to preemptively set up that spell damage, but then he foregoes the ability to develop the Water Elemental like you were talking about.
Yeah, it really could do with that Soul of the Forest. That would make a massive difference. 9 mana is just perfect alongside the Glowfly Swarm to force the double clear, which can become quite...
Oh my.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cheap spells coming into hand, and remember, this is exactly what Spellmage does. Viper does have the ability to play Font of Power first to see if there's a better minion to consider placing onto the board. Maybe another spell damage minion. Firebrand is pretty solid, but doesn't have anything else to do this turn besides that.
Oh, and he burns the soul.
That's rough. That's rough.
Yeah, this is really awkward now because Viper's got the Raz next turn as well with spell damage in play. So a reward here for holding onto these Eclipses, but is it going to be enough reward? Burning that Soul of the Forest is going to be so painful.
Yes. Question for Joaquin is if he wants to just play a Power of the Wild or if he wants to commit to the Pride's Fury. Has to be mindful of what his mana looks like on the following turn as well, because he will overload for 2. So he just holds here at 3 apiece, and Viper does not have the answer because his spell damage minion, even if it's stuck, wouldn't be enough.
Yep, and Lightning Bloom into Arbor up next turn is a lot. It's a technical term that us statisticians use. It's a lot of damage.
It's definitely a sizable amount of damage that Viper is not hoping to take. More card draw. Shooting Star.
Yeah, and not
he
just
had a little
card
bit extra
draw,
spell damage.
but mana production as well. When you start having the Incanters flow into Refreshing Spring and you just get more mana back than you start with. Unless you hit the Prime.
But curiously enough, Viper had the opportunity of playing the Aegwin here with the spell damage Shooting Star. That was... Or actually, sorry, I apologize. It was a 0 mana Cram session. Okay, never mind. He did not have the ability to do that, and the Shooting Star still costed 1.
Oh,
Did not. Finds
so
Combustion. Okay. I mean, that's very close to a board clear here. No, it is a board clear because of the Raz.
Yeah, what a nonsense turn. He starts off with just enough mana to play the Raz, then he did 5,000 things, then he played the Raz.
Yeah. Okay, so this is looking very good, and right now, Joaquin got shut down pretty hard. Shows you the importance of things like that Soul of the Forest, and Joaquin's going to immediately concede after that big swing turn. Very disappointing start on Joaquin's behalf because he was hoping that with such a powerful amount of card draw early with the Fungal Fortunes ×2, he was going to try to go for a big power load turn. But here's the problem. Cards like Raz Frost Whisperer doesn't actually die to Druid because you used your 2 Lunar Eclipses at that point. So I totally get why Joaquin concedes there because it's just going to indefinitely clear his board for the rest of the game. Not to mention that there's also an Aegwin to follow it up. So Viper, showing you why Mage just has so many tools. There was a couple of different ways he could have gone clearing on that board. And just showing you why card draw is a priority, right? We were kind of wondering, like, here are all these tools in his hand that he could clear with, but drawing cards gives you access to finding the best possible removal tools. And so very clean turn from Viper. Overall, just an excellent job diffusing what could have been a game that snowballed out of control. Ends up just being a very easy victory.
Yeah, very nicely done. And this Druid isn't even the biggest problem here. I actually think the Paladin is the biggest problem here. I may be wrong on this, but I think it's unfavored against Viper's whole lineup. I don't think it's targeted. It's like 45, 48, whatever percent each time. So it's not like it's going to get 3-0'd a lot. But this Paladin is going to be awkward. And the more that Viper just gets his other decks out of the way, the more this Paladin's going to have to have less chances to get a victory. I think it's just not very well placed in this match at all.
Okay, well, I guess only time will tell. I mean, Druid is one of the big X factors only due to the popularity. The other classes that you see are the most common classes being played currently, assuming that you're not banning Priest. Priest, while having low amount of data relative to the other classes, is largely due to, I believe, warping nearly 50% of the bans from all of the lineups. So with that, game number 2, looks like Joaquin is turning to Miracle Rogue. Miracle Rogue with the animated broomstick as a way to get onto the board, so favoring a little bit extra tempo as opposed to some of the other combo plays that you can do with, say, Penflinger. Do you like this version of the deck with the animated broomstick, Lorenzo?
I do, yeah. I was watching people practice this the other night, and the broomstick just gives you so much more going on. You end up with a lot of rubbish minions hanging about after they've done their job. And so having the broomstick to turn them into actually a fighting force means you're no longer just using your minions to clear the board, like your prize plunderers, that sort of stuff, and your wand thieves. They actually get to do some attacking and clear up. And this is the matchup against the warrior where the broomstick makes the most difference. I still think the rogue isn't favoured. I think the warrior has it good here. But suddenly, you can prize plunder one thing and trade into another. A lot of these things don't have a lot of health until later in the match. So, yeah, I like the broomstick is the TLDR.
Fair enough. And we'll see if it's enough to give him some fight against Rush Warrior, another deck that doesn't need broomstick, largely because an overwhelming majority of your cards can rush anyways. We've seen Rush Warrior do very well statistically. On broadcast, it's had some good moments. It's had some awkward moments. Overall, though, it's definitely in consideration to be one of the highest performing classes right now in the Masters Tour, just solely because of its win rate versus Rogue. If you know Rogue is going to be one of the most popular classes and people are unlikely to ban it, and also Warrior isn't super popular relative to the other three classes of Mage, Priest, and Rogue, you can really get some edge there, which it seems like Warrior lineups are finding right now. I like that inclusion. I think it's one of the classes to bring for a success in this Masters Tour.
Yeah, you are then forced to ban Priest, but you get a ban. That's the point. So you're banning the Priest when you bring it, because that is an awful matchup. Warrior versus Priest. You do not want to play that as the Warrior. So you do kind of hamstring your lineup a little bit into, you're bringing Warrior because you're banning Priest straight away. And that gives you less options in the rest of your lineup. So it had better be a good performer.
All right, well, game 2 is upon us here as Viper keeping the imprisoned Gnarg, the best possible card you can play on one, holding on to Ringmaster Watley as well. I've definitely had my fair share of moments where I've held this card and felt like I was punished from it in matchups where it was too fast. But I think it was largely because I wasn't prioritizing the correct way to set it up. It's just so good to give the Warrior resources, and largely, due to the fact that Warrior needs those big hands to really make those powerful swing turns is what makes it really sing. Again, this is a tough matchup for Joaquin. We'll see if he can find a way to swing things into his favor, and he's got a hand that can do that. Look at his curve.
Yeah, he kept the 3 and the 4, which, they're very powerful cards. It was no surprise, but if you are newer to Hearthstone, the deck is so full of 1s and 2s that he was very likely to fill that curve out. So, kind of similar to what Viper did, actually, keeping the Watley, and he is also likely to fill out the curve. So they're relying on maths and on the deck doing what it should, knowing that the larger percentage of their cards are very cheap. Both players able to keep the top end of the curve ready to go. Nice 1, 2, 3, 4 if possible. But Viper,
apologies that we don't have the visual on Discover, but does find the bumper car. Oh, sorry, what were you saying, Neil?
I was just saying he sort of missed, really. If he doesn't draw well next turn, then Viper could end up in a fairly mediocre spot here.
All too true. We've seen the Warriors flounder about, and potentially why, holding on to Ringmaster Watley does open yourself up to a risk like that, where you can fall a little bit behind by not using your mana efficiently, because it's one of the more expensive cards in your deck. But again, I don't really blame him for that hold. It seems entirely reasonable, given that he needs to have those big resource counts in order for the swings in a matchup like this. Finds Parade Leader, which ends up being a very convenient card when you're pairing it with the bumper card Dark Moon Riders to get those 1/1 rushers, getting a little +2 attack buff. Yes, sir. Sign me up.
Yep, suddenly from having a fairly good-looking position, and this is why it's such a hard matchup for the Rogue, Viper just clears everything up and has 2 half-decent minions left over. And it is likely to come down to how this Kazakus performs and whether he decides to play it just the once or whether he decides to delay and try and get double value out of this Kazakus. That's the big decision right now.
Joaquin deviating from playing the Kazakus on curve. Can't even play the gold next turn if he wanted to. Doesn't seem like it's setting him up for success in any category. Finds the animated broomstick. If he wishes to deal with the Parade Leader that way,
I think he might.
Even has.
He doesn't have to mess around with the golems, and it's an option he doesn't need to take. He waits a turn or two, takes not rush on the golem, takes something a bit more aggressive or a bit more damage dealing. Divine Shields, whatever, and then you can come in with the Broomstick. I think maybe he'll try and plan out 2 or 3 turns ahead here.
Yeah, it's totally fair. And I like that. I like that because it gives the ability for you to win back the board when you anticipate your opponent to build things up. Viper's holding on to, a card that he still hasn't played yet, and he's been holding on to it for quite some time. So I think he has to imagine it being a powerful 4 or 5 drop. In this case, it's Sword Eater coming out, so I think he's anticipating a good turn 5. And now, because Viper's done a great job of trading out the board early, Joaquin has to hope that this is a big hit from the Kazakus.
Yep, needs to roll this well. Probably going to go for 5s. That's the default when you want something fairly good but not incredibly good. 1s tend to be awkward, though you must never discount them because you can still get some good stuff from them. But he needs more than just a 1-turn swing here. He needs some bigger things for the future. Summoner copy's usually decent, especially with Shadow Step in hand.
Yep, got offered the opportunity for Fire Bloom, and I believe Joaquin even had the chance to pick up that Poisonous. We could set up for a really powerful way to swing the board. The Battle Cry does double dip, so if you give the Golem Poisonous and it deals damage to a minion, you will be able to get the kill no matter how much health they have. Looks like Joaquin instead opted for the Stealth instead. Okay.
Yeah, a chance to prepare if he wants, although I don't think he's going to have time to prepare anything. He's getting beaten down pretty quickly here, yeah, and he's like... That just isn't...
Quite unfortunate.
Yeah, it's not what you want from your 5/5 Golem, is it? It's just not really done enough.
It's solid for sure, but yeah, it's not like as impactful as you would like it to be immediately. It's not a big deal because of the fact that it's like he didn't get enough value. It's a big deal because he's just going to be behind in tempo, and if Viper understands that Joaquin has a combat trick heavy hand with Shadow Step and Animated Broomsticks and Tenwu, he's just going to rush him down. And Joaquin can do all these fancy things as he wants, he's just going to die. Viper has another source of 6 damage through Sword Eater, has Alexstrasza the Lifebringer, and he does not gain life. Just from that alone, the 3 swings of the Fiery War Axe equivalents and the Lifebringer is 17, which happens to be the breakpoint that Joaquin is at. So this is a very bad path for Joaquin to be on right now, being so far behind and taking too much damage.
Yeah, it's just all the things that Rogue does badly. Clearing big boards, nope, not very good at that. Although, again, the Broomstick will help a touch. Healing, nope, we don't do any of that around here. And getting back a board once you get behind, well, not with this hand, although it is a thing that they can do. So, yeah, this is not panning out very well for him at all. But he needs to keep his cool. He conceded very quickly when he got behind in the last game. And I'd like to see him play this out if it does become... unsustainable, just to make sure he stays in the zone, to be honest. It's not quite there yet. This turn, he still has a few throws of the dice left to make sure he can get something post-evolution. Deck of Lunacy.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
But don't play the deck until next turn. You don't draw from it until the turn after. It's probably too slow to get you out.
Well, the potion and the golem have some quite amazing synergy, frankly. It's just a little bit of a shame, again, that, Joaquin has the stealth version, which did allow him to get the trade after the fact. But yes, the fact that it does not have poisonous is quite annoying. Oh. Does have the animated broomstick for the clear.
Yeah, he's turned it all around for this one turn, but he's gone kind of all in to do it.
Oh, wow. He's taking additional damage. Oh my.
Yeah, I don't mind this as long as he's above 8 at this point, although 11 is a dangerous number because 8 from Alexstrasza and any weapon is the 11. Or these guys, they also do 3 as well.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the thing about Viper in the previous swing. He was wondering, what if I can't play Sword Eater and I have to play Samuro? Is it worth swinging? Yes, absolutely yes, because he has the Gennard next turn. That wakes it from dormant and equips that Fiery War Axe. And now Joaquin has no board. Has cards that are almost entirely unplayable. Shadow Step and Potion Evolution are completely worthless. And he picks up a Field Contact that has no synergy with any card in his hand right now. I guess he has synergy in the form that he could play Potion of Illusion and get a cheaper field contact. And that's not going to be enough for now. He's still alive because we're not at 9 mana yet. But we're getting dangerously close.
Yeah. And I mean, you saw the value of the broomstick in this matchup. Like, I know he's probably still going to lose, but that was the one turn where he was fighting with the warrior on fair ground, if you like, so to speak. Oh, is this leaving? Where he actually managed to clear the whole board because he had a broomstick, and he also had rush for one turn. But that's the problem. You play your minions out as the rogue, and they're sitting ducks, and then the warrior just cleans them up. And with the attacker's advantage of choosing where to go, just gets a good trade, repeat. And just the one turn where the broom was played was the one turn where the rogue looked like a functioning deck in this matchup.
I mean, Joaquin needs to kill everything, have weapon disarm and heal. It's just too impossible of a task. He will show off some cool stuff of what Field Contact could do. This is showing to you why it's considered Miracle Rogue. Field Contact essentially feels like a 3-mana Auctioneer at the moment. It's just not enough.
Yeah.
A little bit too small of an effort. And now Joaquin is just dead on board. That's going to wrap up game 2. Viper out to a very quick lead. That's going to do it. I mean, Viper stone cold, but this is also a matchup also difficult to lose from the Warriors' perspective if they are able to keep their curve consistent. So well done and very textbook game from Viper.
Did you ever feel in your Hearthstone career that you'd be saying that a 3-mana Auctioneer just wasn't good enough right now? Like, that statement just hits so hard as to where the game is at the moment. Yeah, it's a 3-mana Auctioneer. Sorry, that's not going to get you out of trouble. Remember Rogue in the olden days with a 3-mana Auctioneer? Imagine what that would have done to people. Made them cry, I'm pretty sure.
There times existed the 3-mana Auctioneer because Auctioneer used to cost 5 mana back in the day in the very beginning. And then you saw players shadow step it in pinch scenarios. So yeah, it was possible. It wasn't very fun to go up against, but if you were the Miracle Rogue player back then, oh hell yeah, sign me up. Yeah. Now Joaquin, on the other hand, is not thinking that because his hand did not deliver him out of that situation, but also just goes to show you this common theme that we're seeing in a lot of these tempo-based decks. You're trying to pressure set up the board and make it so that these decks that struggle with healing can't really deal with Alex Strahd or even just direct damage from face because taunt doesn't seem to be super prevalent in the meta right now.
Yeah, and well, whatever the meta may be, because this tournament meta is so strange, obviously, with so many people banning Priest, I made kind of a mess of things. But now Viper is going to have to get it done with his Rogue, possibly. Calling it the weak link sounds like it's some sort of terrible deck, but I think it's the weakest of his decks that he has brought. I think he's just brought the 4 top decks from sort of stat sites, if I'm honest, but he's going to get at least a 50-50 in the mirror, and then he also gets a couple of slight favourables as well. So Viper looking really good here, and a chance, I believe, to go 3-0 from Viper, who already came second in one of the regional tournaments as well in Grandmasters.
Yeah, that's right. You know, Viper's just been very consistently competing at the top for quite some time. He's often defined, when you look at his lineups, by some of the very big risks that he's taken. He's like a lover of being contrarian to the metagame. People say, this deck, this class's archetype is bad, you should not play it. Viper says, I'm going to not only play it, I'm going to win with it. It's very cool to watch him compete. He's one of my favorite competitors to spectate in Europe for that reason.
Yeah.
That being said, it doesn't. I was just going to say that it doesn't seem like he's doing anything too particularly out of the ordinary with this Rogue deck as we go into this Rogue mirror. Yeah,
in fact, in this tournament, he hasn't done much crazy at all. But I did speak to him a couple of years ago about exactly this, and he was saying that, which is odd because he ends up getting 6-3, 7-2 a lot. But he says it's no point getting 6-3 or 7-2 in a tournament. You want to either win the tournament or get out of the tournament. I think he'd prefer to win them than get out of them. But the point being, bringing the steady stuff, which everybody's ready for, kind of condemns you to not really getting those extreme results you need to hit a top 16 or a top 8 in a 400-player event. So he doesn't mind taking a chance. He doesn't mind if it goes wrong, because if it goes right, you just cruise through the field.
Sometimes there's deck building victories feel the sweetest.
Oh,
Not super common, which is partially why people love doing that in a big field like this. Taking a look at the opening hands. Very nice for Viper to have that Octobot on 2. However, it was one of these things where his hand could easily fall apart if it doesn't find matters of substance. Meanwhile, Joaquin has things of substance, but it's a little bit heavier cost. So, usually in this spot, I like being Viper's position way more just because it gives you ways to enable powerful plays. That being said, Joaquin gets to take the first stab at it. Ooh, okay, that makes things a lot better. An efficient Octobot.
Yeah, I'm just a big fan of having Jandice in my opening hand. I've got to admit, it's so ridiculous. I know it costs 6 now, so, some of the instincts from pre-nerf are a little bit wrong, but in a mirror where you're sort of hitting each other with 1-4s and 3-4s and 2-3s and just general rubbish, 2 chunky 5-drops can just change things in a hurry.
Absolutely. In a matchup where that kind of delicate tempo balance is on a knife's edge, it can easily start getting way out of control when you start putting things a little bit overstated for its mana cost. In Jandice's case, a lot of stats that are overcosted for 5 mana or 6 mana, but you're going to discount it likely. It gets way out of control.
And Viper's not having this easy because whatever he plays now, it's going to trigger the Octobot. Yeah, he just decides, okay, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. We'll have a reduced each. Obviously, it favors Joaquin because he gets to draw first and then do the trade. But Viper's hand will cost basically nothing next turn if this happens.
Initiating overdrive.
Negative numbers are remembered, so there's going to be some interesting interactions happen here with the neophyte and the reduced coin and that sort of thing.
That's right. Oh, coin and Shadow Step still cost 0. Oh, 1 turn off from being able to find it.
Does he now want to keep the coin? His plan would have been to just dump the entire hand this turn and play multiple Mancrics and so on. But now, do you want to keep the coin? Because Jandice coming down would be such a big deal.
I think I do. Mancrick and the Wand Thief is definitely a great start. The Vanessa Van Cleave will give you a Cult Neophyte, which is pretty powerful. Finds an opportunity for Devolving Missiles or Flame Strike, both one very cheap and one pretty expensive tool to fight back to the board, but they are very good at different points. Like Flame Strike, for example, very good at answering things like Jandice a lot of the times.
Yeah, it depends where he sees it going. I think he sees that his Jandice is going to cause a lot of issues for Joaquin for 2 turns running. And when all those issues are done, he's got a Flame Strike left over at the end of it. That seems good to me.
No one crosses the uncrowned.
I'm down.
Right. Oh, you would have been definitely going to play the passage before that was picked up, I think. But now it's possibly a little different.
Right. So the most important thing for Joaquin right now is to think, what's the best setup for Jandice? He wants to keep a squeaky clean board if possible, or at least set up a ton of board tension that Viper has to start trading down, make it very vulnerable. So that way Jandice isn't just easily challenged by whatever is on the board preemptively. So I like this setup from Joaquin. Tenwu, a lot of times are very focused on the Alex Straza combo, but that is very nice setup. The double Cult Neophyte. Speaking of, it's a Neophyte party, and we're all invited.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen 4 of them on the board before. Actually not going to do a lot. That's the interesting thing here. And I wonder if Viper senses that. There's an opposing Jandice is going to need dealing with next turn, and that, these neophytes don't actually do anything about dealing with it. But does he have anything better other than 1 neophyte, and he can't even play the stab?
Well, if he's dialed in, he knows about the possibility of what he narrowly missed on. Viper barely did not get the connection for the minion discount onto Jandice Barov. Saw Joaquin make a rather aggressive tempo play while holding onto a card for quite some time on the far left. We know that Jandice is in the middle, but something you just consider that they have a heavier hand. And Jandice comes out. Let's see what ends up being part of the summoning. Are you kidding me? Overlord Runthok, as well as an Earth Elemental, two of the best minions that you can ask for. And Viper immediately looks away because that one is a painful one to examine on closer glance. That is not what you want to see for Viper, and that might be a situation where you can't come back from.
Yeah, when we were talking in terms of Jandice is really good, there's really good, and then there's this. This is just about cards you would choose to have. Earth Elemental always ridiculous to deal with if your opponent is rogue and they have no way of dealing with it if they're not secret rogue. And just a rush minion when you're fighting for board is so important too.
Choose soon.
Well, I mean, there's nothing too much off the top that I'm immediately thinking about that can really bail Viper out of the situation, but maybe there's something.
Well, he can play
starting off with.
Yeah, you can play into this Flame Strike, just leave up some board here, take some damage, play into this Flame Strike for next turn, start again.
Yeah, it's just that some damage ends up becoming a lot of damage if your opponent is able to press in. I guess the good thing he can kill this Jandice off, right? So you can just double trade, hero power down the Jandice to avoid a Shadow Step opportunity.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I agree with you that it's not great, but from the position you're in, when your opponent has that Jandice roll, I think you do need to set up. And maybe Viper ends up not doing the Flame Strike. Maybe he ends up taking his own chance with Jandice himself, depending what happens next turn.
Interestingly enough, the last card that was played was Jandice. So Vanessa Shadow Step would give him another Jandice. It's not the position to do that. I'm thinking if there's anything else that he wants to do besides this dagger play that we talked about, it's pretty clear. Joaquin looking for something to play. Secret Passage to start.
Yeah, he just wants anything. Just stuff will do perfectly now. It doesn't need to be good stuff. Just anything he can get on the board, and he can get all that out there. That's fine.
AoE for days. Both players with Flame Strike. And as we mentioned, yes, Viper has Flame Strike, but he's not addressing the core issue, which is that he's taking damage and he's falling behind the race and he doesn't have ways to heal. And he's just going to die unless he has some other way to generate things to heal that, you know, of course, can swing the matchup. Jandice can do that. Kazakus might be able to do that.
So he's got to work out whether he thinks Jandicing for his own Earth Elemental, maybe. Yeah, because he's in a tough spot. Is maybe better than just Flame Striking and letting your opponent do it all again. It doesn't sound very good when you word it like that, and it's not, but he has to at least look at it. There are a lot of 5-cost minions. There's 64 5-mana minions, so your chance of hitting the Earth Elemental are a little bit too low.
Oh my goodness, has no activator for Swindle, so he would just play Swindle straight up.
That's actually quite, quite funny. I don't want to laugh at him, but that's an unfortunate position to be in.
Swindle picks another Swindle, activates for itself, Shadow Step, and Kazakus. Some breathing room for Viper. A ray of hope has broken through in this mirror for Viper to take it 3-0. Let's see if he can make the most out of it. What's the best course of action? Is it Kazakus? You get 2 chances at looking for a golem that you really want, or Jandice.
Yeah, it's irritating for him that next turn he only has 8. So if he wants to Kazakus Golem into Golem with, say, Lifesteal, he has to do that now. But if he wants to get aggressive, Jandice is the most aggressive play immediately. And he's unlikely to take 11 soon, but he kind of will be treating it like he's on 3 because Alexstrasza exists and gets found really quickly in Rogue. That's just what happens.
So many options.
So with that all in mind, I like the Jandice and close your eyes and hope to get good stuff off the Golem next turn. Maybe you can buff the Jandice minions with a small amount with the 1-drop Golems.
Choose soon.
True, I do think the Golems have a lot of possibility. More importantly for Viper, I think it creates a lot of threats for Joaquin of like how he chooses to go about setting up his Alexstrasza, but we do know the Shadow Step is in hand.
Well, these are irritating, but that's all. He just needs to find a way to do 3 more damage. But he needs to do it quite quickly because he might start to lose the board, even with this Flame Strike, because it's just such an expensive card. Rogue doesn't do 7-mana cards well. Even in the days when Rogue needed Sprint to draw cards, it didn't really like it without preparation, producing 3 mana off it.
I was anticipating an Alexstrasza Shadow Step play because I don't really know what Viper can do to punish that. But he does find the Wicked Stab. What I'm afraid of is playing minions here, because what I don't want to do is give the Golem to have Lifesteal Rush and something else to be able to gain a bunch of life to get outside that range.
No, you're right. Just don't play minion. Play Alexstrasza Step, and yeah, you're right. Then there's no lifesteal on the Golem. So,
I mean, that being said, the setup is still here, and I don't think Viper got that. I have to double check to see the Greater Golem. He did not. So that possibility is not going to come to fruition. Is there a Jandice summoning that we're not thinking about here?
yeah, you usually find when you say, "Oh, good player missed this thing," you usually find they have something in their mind that you're just not thinking of when you're in the casting seat when you can see what's going on. But I really can't think of any way that Viper could have gained health there outside of giving him minions to trade into.
Yep, I think Viper might be out of this one. He could dig deeper with Secret Passage and try to find something, but I don't think that's going to be the case. So this should do it. He doesn't know about the Alexstrasza, of course we do, so he's likely to pass it over. From his perspective, is it worth using Wicked Stab onto the Octopot, right? Like trying to figure out optimal uses of his cards from this position. If Alexstrasza didn't exist, or rather, if he knew that he was safe from Alexstrasza, I think he would probably, in his mind, feel safe enough to not have to use Wicked Stab, because he's already seen both of them being used.
Yep, he has to just assume it's not there, and he's going to get the bad news that it is there. Joaquin's going to get his name on the scoreboard, as the phrase goes. Get one back with, beginning. You don't reverse sweep without winning the first one, Dan. So it's a start.
That is true, and that's going to be game number 3. As it looked like from the moment Joaquin was able to summon a bunch of stats from the Jandice, being able to play a really consistent amount of tempo throughout. Like we talked about how not only was the Jandice good, but the setup into Jandice to ensure that his opponent didn't have a strong enough board, because if he left up a bunch of that stuff and just assumed Jandice would bail him out, then Viper with all these minions be able to push through, it could have been really bad for Joaquin despite hitting really hard. But I mean, this is one of those moments where you feel like everything is destined for you to win this game.
Yeah, I think for Viper's health there, being 2-0 ahead at the time it happened was probably a good thing, because those are the ones you do not want at the start of a match. You don't want any time, but they will happen to you. That's the nature of the game. So nice. If you're going to get it when you're 2-0 up, chance to bounce back very quickly. And that is, in my opinion, that was the easiest of the 3 wins to take for Joaquin. The mirror. I think it just gets worse now. He's got the choice between his aggro pally or his druid. And I assume he'll take the paladin. He seems to be trying to get them in order of likelihood to win. But it's going to be hard for him to win both those games.
We'll see, right? We've seen Paladins sometimes just steamroll because their opponents don't have the response to it. You get an early Crab Rider stuck, It turns out you just keep buffing it over and over, and then it's dealt more than half your opponent's life. In fact, you just won on turn 5. That's what Aggro Paladin can do. But Rogue, especially the rogues that have the secret package, we know that Viper does not have it, but that's partially why secret package has been becoming more popular within Rogue. And even when we saw specialists in Grandmasters, that was being teched in. There was like some light amount of, here are the 5 secrets that I want to put in with the Blackjack Stunner, and I'm going to try and swing some matchups. Ends up being really strong. But Paladin, if there's not a way to check that, they'll completely steamroll you, even if they're playing things like that's relatively innocuous, like a Nerubian Egg. That card has been very sneaky, but very powerful when it starts to get activated and coming online.
Yeah, I think Jumbo is to blame again for the egg. Like he did really well all the way back in what I'm going to guess 2016 Spring Championship, something like that, with the Nerubian Egg in Paladin. And here we are again 5 years later, same guy, same deck, same card, doing the same broken things. But this time other people are piloting it a lot more, whereas back then it was quite a niche deck back in the day.
Yeah, the Egg Paladins and Egg decks in general have seen lots of variation and pioneered by similar people. John Bray being one of them. Jackie from also over the pond in the UK, also a notable egg lover.
Yeah, I
also love eggs. I had an egg breakfast burrito today, Neil. It's great. We're fans of eggs here.
I thought you might have had enough, but that joke's been done to death. I thought I'd just drop it in there.
Well, going to game number 4. Full mulligans on both sides. Ends up looking pretty nice for Joaquin. Viper has a hand that has a lot of potential, but it really comes online in the mid stages of the game. Sometimes I do wonder if I want to ever play the Aug Merchant on 1 just to get ahead of what my opponent can be doing. I just don't want it to ever have the possibility of sticking a turn 1 minion into hand of a doll, but that's, I end up usually bailing because I feel like it's a really important thing for Rogue to have that, especially if you have Octobot, but Viper does not have that, so it makes me feel like this is the play to consider, and he's going to commit to it. Aug Merchant on 1.
Yeah, it works because he's going to likely a lot of the time have to dagger on 2 here, and then this play would be a very common thing that came out of it, trading into the 1/1 or a buffed minion or 2 minions from first aid school, all that stuff. Either way, having 2 ways to attack on turn 2 is very important against the Paladin. But he was kind of forced into it by his hand. I don't think it would have been his choice in some of the situations. Is the egg of which you spake.
Yes, and Viper plays a very strong turn 3 from Rogue. Probably the ideal turn 3 from Rogue, assuming you don't have to respond to an immediate threat. And Joaquin's going to activate the egg. Not 1, but 2 hands of a doll. Which just makes sense, unless the doll has many hands, and I'm just not familiar with WoW lore, as usual. Oh my gosh, what? You're telling me this guy hits Mankrik on 3, Kazakus on 4, Golem on 5, Jandice on 6, probably picks up a Shadow Step somewhere in between that to collect even more value. I mean, what is in the water today, Neil? I don't understand.
I mean, it does go back to his turn 1, though, where he wasn't scared to throw the 1 drop out there. Otherwise, he'd be taking a massive beating already, and he'd be so far behind. So, sure, he's definitely drawing really nicely and exactly what he wants, but some people wouldn't have played that on turn 1, and they would be behind now, and then this would sort of just be not enough. But as it is, yeah, he's going to be in a great spot going forward with this amazing curve.
I mean, he's going for a 1-cost version to try and win back some tempo. Can activate the field contact next turn as well. I like it. I was thinking immediately about the 5 Golem, but when you evaluate the rest of the hand from Viper, he might want to go wider here as opposed to the 5-mana Golem, which gives him a lot of possibility to get traded up into, right? We think about how Paladin's really great at going tall, if they play like a really powerful Blessing of Kings, it almost feels like it negates the value of that. And by having a lot of these small minions that can get him the cards that he really needs, One Thief can give him Devolving Missiles, for example, and might be a ticket to help stall the Paladin's tempo and maybe even wrestle it away before Jandice comes online.
Viper's a little bit gutted here, I think, because he had the 3 damage, and he had the opportunity to have this minion twice, which would be perfect right now. But as it is, he took the Poisonous, which is nowhere near as good. But he wasn't to know that he'd be up against exactly 2-3 health minions on this turn. But as it happens, the other choice would have worked out better for him. And now he's got a bit of a dilemma. But he is still going to go ahead and play this way. Obviously, he might have been facing a massive 12-11 egg, in which case he would have loved to have this. And that was what he was planning for, obviously.
Poisonous plus damage. The deadliest of combos picks up Devolving Missiles. Viper can't even really believe his luck. He's just, praising RNG's straight to the sky. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm so good at Hearthstone. And yes, sir, you are.
I think one day, Dan, we should just cover up the board and commentate on the reactions of the players. And I think we'd have been able to get this exact game perfect so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would be able to guess things like the double web spinner coming out of Joaquin's first day of school. But that has some room for some real spice. There are some pretty high impact beasts that might surprise you with how strong they are. Every time I get web spinner, oh wow, Viper is real mad right now about that rusher. But the Crab Rider comes out, and now with the extra attack is going to be able to push a ton of damage. And the clean board for Jandice is not going to be there. This is a scary board to play Jandice into because you could easily get punished very hard by the amount of damage that's on the board.
How lucky do you feel with these Devolvings? You're not going to hit 3 individual minions. It's just not how the maths works out. I think you have to trade one away first. You would love to throw this Devolving out there and just devolve all 3 minions, but that's pretty unlikely.
Very much so. And it goes to show you the impact of a mana cost nerf. A lot of people say things like, hey, it doesn't matter if you nerf it by 1. It's not a big enough impact. I mean, you look at this kind of situation, Jandice being at 5 makes a huge difference. What? Rainbow comes out, and the Carousel Griffin to give it some stickiness. It does not have +3/+3 and taunt, though, because the corrupt effect is not in.
It's plenty.
But man, was that a pretty solid finding here from Viper.
Yeah, Greybow's one of the best cards, I think. Oh, you said that last time Jandice was played, but Greybow is really, really good. It's so irritating to play around in these sort of trade battles.
Wait, what? Another rusher picks up the Hammer of the Naru as well.
Viper did hold on to those Devolving Missiles, playing as Jandice, sort of. He needed the taunt, but now Joaquin's kind of had to play bigger, taller minions than he really wanted to, and that's Devolving Missiles, which is something he can't realistically play around. He'll be more scared maybe of Flame Strike. He might even have gone taller if he could. I think we might just press the hero power button here to play around AoE in general.
Let me think.
Yeah, what's the follow-up play here, knowing that you're going to run into another roadblock?
I cannot wait to read these.
Yeah. That may have swayed.
I mean, this is where Devolving Missiles really hurts, to say the least. But that hammer plus the Alex sets up a line for Joaquin to finish out here.
Yeah, it does.
Two Death Imps, not going to be impactful. Viper needs to find a way to turn on the gas now. Trading the Jandice is of dire importance. He's going to do that. Greybow, it just goes to show you how valuable Greybow is as a pickup of Jandice. You get like what feels infinite taunts. And Joaquin does not have the ability to deal with that. And he might just be locked out by a narrow margin of 2 health.
Whether this Octobot ever gets procced by his opponent or whether it's very often, because he wants a secret passage next turn, trading the Octo and have some incredibly cheap passaged stuff. Rather than play the Neophyte and lock his opponent out of any spells, because there's nothing to put the spells on right now. They're all buffs, basically. But this really works out nicely for Viper. And it's all in on the secret passage, but secret passages with field contact on the board tend to end well.
Very much so. Joaquin trades into the Greybow, which is interesting. I think it's like encouraging Viper to just trade. So, you know, maybe Viper bumps, it goes onto the prize plunder. Oh, if it goes on field contact. The 1 minion he doesn't want to just freely trade here. He can draw first, Cult Neophyte. Brain freeze. Okay, now here's a time where Viper has to be mindful of what his opponent's trying to do. If he just trades his 2-1 prize plunder, he's now open to the possibility that Joaquin can swing to the face and set up for Alex Straza. So he has to not only think about his own game plan, he has to cut the amount of outs from Joaquin.
Oh
what? That's a Vanessa Van Cleef. That can pull the hammer of the Naru and give him a taunt minion for the following turn.
Yep, and that's exactly what he's doing. All he has to do now is not mess up, and he's going to have taunt minions for 2 turns, which, if he makes a wide enough board, which he's showing signs of being able to do, could be enough.
Nearly perfectly done by Viper. I think if he could had a little bit extra time, might have wanted to play Wand Thief. I'm not sure if he got it squeezed in time. Looks like he did not. But that is totally A-okay. What a series of swing turn. We call it Miracle Rogue in modern day for a reason, and you get to see exactly why. Not only did he cut out the outs from Joaquin, he has set up a 2-turn lethal.
Not quite, but yes, technically it will be, because he's got 18, I believe, next turn, unless I've miscounted it. But he'll find one. Like, he's got plenty of card draw and a Wand Thief to go with all that as well.
True. No, you're right. You're right. I miscounted by 1, but Wand Thief does give the possibility of that. A little bit awkward, though, because of board space reasons.
Yeah, he can also just set up another one. Just put down 2 taunts, clear up what's on the board, and just set up another one. But he probably won't do it that way, but he's got plenty of good choices available to him here. I think the key is he's got to do something. Make your decision and go there, because otherwise problems could arise.
Who I like.
Timer is ticking away.
Initiating overdrive.
Discounting the hand. Setting up Wand Thief, giving himself the opportunity to do so. Creating board space. Very nicely done so far by Viper. Does not find it.
Cone of Cold's plenty though, isn't it?
I would think so. I guess you just hammer, freeze.
Go! He has got to go!
Yeah, he'll be fine. He'll be just fine. There's nothing that Joaquin can do reasonably at this stage.
Yeah, he didn't need a cone with a double brain freeze, I guess, but yeah. That's the important part. Stop that egg from having any sort of chance. And now it's all fine.
Joaquin had the ability lined up. He played to his outs. Viper just generated them, and almost, you know, a tit for tat. You get a great Jandice the previous game. Guess what? I got the Jandice for game number 4, and Viper closes it out 3-1. Very nice play by Viper. You know, for the most part, played it flawlessly. Like, there's maybe like one thing he could have done slightly better, but not even that big of a deal, considering that his macro line was phenomenal. And overall, like, you see the very important technical play coming into the equation here for Rogue, because it's very easy to mess up with this deck. Had he taken just a little bit extra damage in any corner by a factor of 2, he would have died to the Alex Strauss battle cry on turn 9. So very nicely done.
Yep, and don't let Viper fool you into thinking he isn't still really good at Hearthstone. He spends a bit of time doing other things sometimes, but that's not necessarily for the worst. When you're jamming Hearthstone 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, that can have detrimental effects. And I think Viper is playing enough. I think he's still invested enough in the game to be getting these good results. And 3-0 already. He's got every chance of getting to that top 16. This is a fantastic start, obviously.
Yep. Obviously, a sad result for Joaquin and fans of Joaquin, but I'm sure he will come back even stronger. You mentioned that he's on the cusp, potentially trying to break that ceiling and crack the top standings in order to make it to Grandmasters and turn that professional Hearthstone career into a reality, or rather the dream into a reality. So I'm sure we'll see Joaquin back in future Hearthstone tournaments as well as rounds. I mean, he's still in it. He just took his first loss. But right now the moment does belong to Viper, and a really good job once again just recapping how he was able to abate the Paladin aggression, play with the narrowest of margins, flip the script, and while Joaquin was at 30 life just a turn and a half ago, he ends up dying in a 2.5 turn setup here from Rogue. Excellently done from Viper.
Yeah, and he's just brought the good decks and he's playing them in a solid fashion, and sometimes in